As I travel through this pilgrim land, there is a friend who walks with me. Leads me safely through the sinking sand. It is the Christ of Calvary. This would be my prayer, Lord, each day to help me do the best I can. For I need thy light to guide me day and night. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need thee every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, take me by thy saving power. Hear my plea, my feeble plea. Lord, dear Lord, look down on me. Fill in prayer. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. When I wander through the valley, dim toward the setting of the sun, lead me safely to the land of rest and the ground of life I won. I now put my faith in thee, dear Lord, that I may reach the golden strand. There's no other friend on whom I can depend. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need thee every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, take me by thy saving power. Hear my plea, my feeble plea. Lord, dear Lord, look down on me. Kneel in prayer, blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Is that the one you was talking about? Is that? You got the right one? Okay. Thank you. Come preach to me.
These that song just made the sermon 5 minutes longer. Got excited. Marshall's the same way. He knows the songs that I really like. He'll lead me and you see him smiling on it. Oh, it's got longer. All right, well, good to have everybody back this afternoon. Good to be back. You've seen the videos where a person is attempting what's called it's two things, right? It's called the faith fall or the trust fall. I was going to demonstrate, and I was going to get Branson up here to demonstrate it, but I wasn't going to catch him. I didn't think the elders would appreciate that. But it's the faith fall, where somebody, they fall and you catch them. You've seen the videos. And just imagine the faith it takes to do something like that, where you're willing to fall and let somebody catch you. You have to trust them. You have to have faith they're going to catch you. Because, if I pull Miss Kathy over here and say, Miss Kathy, me and you are going to do the faith fall. I'm going to fall. You're going to catch me. She's probably going to look at me like, If I say the same thing to Jason, he's going to laugh. He's like, okay, come on. He's going to laugh as I hit the ground. Most of us aren't going to practice the faith falls. And yet there's an aspect of this where it's very much so a real part of life. Because, and here's why, we are called to walk by faith. But we talk about this regularly. What is faith really? And is faith that important? You see, we're going to see the answer to that this afternoon, the difference in walking by ability and power and all these different things versus walking by faith. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 9 once again. We are close to wrapping up Mark chapter 9, and I'm almost a little sad that we don't have many studies left in the Gospel of Mark. I know we've been in the Gospel of Mark. I had to go back and look for over a year. And there's just so much in this Gospel. I love the Gospel of Mark. But on Sunday mornings, we're really picking up from Mark 11 on that we've been covering for months now anyways. So once we conclude Mark 10, we're going to conclude our Mark study. before, Lord willing, in the afternoon we move on to the book of Acts, which I'm very excited for. I love studying the book of Acts as well. But we are in Mark chapter 9 this afternoon. Our section before us is going to begin, we're going to pick up here verse 14, but I want you to circle, if you haven't yet, at least identify verse 23. Verse 23 is the key text that we're really going to center things around. When Jesus says all things are possible for those who believe. And then He's going to launch into the teaching on what it means to believe. What it looks like for a person to have faith. But what is faith exactly? That we have to identify that before we start this process. Because you hear some people talk about faith like it's wishing upon a star. Or some good luck event, something tied to a fairy tale. You got the dictionary definition of faith where it's a belief in something you can't prove. It's a belief in something you know to be inaccurate. Just all sorts of things inaccurately describing faith. Whereas the Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Substance and evidence are a far cry from wishing upon a star. Faith should be the dominant trait of every single Christian. Because as the Hebrews writer says, for without faith it is impossible to please Him. But here's the problem. At one time or another, whether you want to admit it or not, if we're honest, at one point or another we have struggled with our faith. The apostles did as well. The apostles were not perfect in their faith. And you think about the apostles, and they're going to reveal for us something very important here. They followed Jesus for the last 2.5 years up to this point, where we are in Mark 9. And they've been following the Lord by sight. What they see Him do, what they hear with their ears. They've witnessed the miracles. They've seen demons cast out. Jesus raised the dead. They were there for all of it. They saw it. But from Transfiguration forward, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, Jesus focuses on the cross. He's going to the cross. He's going to be leaving them soon, and they are going to have to live by faith. If you think about this, even the power they had already, casting out demons, healing the sick, they still didn't have the power of faith they needed, and we'll see what unfolds because of that. They're about to learn a faith lesson as followers of Christ, which makes this a faith lesson for us as well. This account is recorded Matthew, Mark, Luke because of its significance, but for the first time, Mark is going to give us the most information to this particular account. So, you hear the running joke with preachers, right? Every time we write a sermon, you have to have 3 points in a poem, something like that. We've got 2 points. These 2 points are going to take 2 weeks. So, we have 1 point today. That's it. This is going to be pretty simple. So, we're going to look at the 2 sections this breaks down into are the incident and the instruction. All we're going to get to today is look at the incident, which sets us up for the instruction that's going to follow. So I want to begin reading in verse 14. I'll have the scripture up here, but I want you to follow along and please take notice. This is an important section. Well, they all are. Mark 9, verse 14. And when He came to the disciples, He, Jesus, saw a great multitude around them and scribes disputing with them. All right, we're just kind of jumping in here, and some of you are like, I don't know where we are. Fair enough. Jesus, along with Peter, James, and John, have just made their way down the mountain from the Transfiguration moment. Jesus' true glory was on full display. But when we look at Transfiguration, we kind of forget something. We sort of get so fixated on the fact that Jesus, Peter, James, and John are up on the mountain, we never ask the question, hey, where are the other 9 apostles? What are they doing? What are they up to in this moment? Well, they're at the base of the mountain and they have their hands full. There's this great multitude there as well. The phrase literally means a large mob of people. And you say, well, why is there a large mob of people with the 9 apostles? Because they didn't think it was going to be the apostles. If you see the apostles of Jesus there, your natural assumption is Jesus is there. They go, He's not there, He's up on the mountain. Now, it's no surprise that the Bible also says the scribes are there. They're in Caesarea Philippi, which northern Galilee, but there's a strong Jewish population there. Now, why would the scribes be here? Well, they're there because it's their turf. This is their land. They're protecting their authority. So they do what they've been doing all along. They're going to dispute with Jesus dispute his authority, his claims of deity. And I have no doubt that these scribes were prodding the apostles as well. But we pick up now verse 15, Jesus. Immediately, there's Mark's favorite word, immediately, just boom, we're there. When they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed and running to him greeted him. That is to say, when Jesus came down the mountain, the mob, they see him and they are just absolutely amazed. In fact, the word is ektambeo, which means they're awestruck. You see your favorite celebrity. Jason, who's your favorite celebrity? You like a Britney Spears fan? Hey, you pick your favorite celebrity, whatever it may be. And you see that person, and you're just in awe of that person. That's what it's describing. They are awestruck for the fact that they now see Jesus. They flock to him because they know what he's done. And I wish they had come to sit at his feet and learn so that they would submit themselves, but they're not going to. They just want to see a show. And so Jesus and the apostles come down the mountain. The people see it. They lose their mind. But it's where Jesus goes I want you to notice. And he asked the scribes. Notice, he doesn't even turn to the crowd. Now, I start coming down the mountain. There's a crowd like cheering for me. I'm going to probably run through the middle of the crowd, do some high five, and yep, hey, appreciate y'all being, Jesus has nothing to do with it. He goes straight to the scribes, and he asks the scribes, what are you discussing with them? When he says discussing, the word literally means it's a confrontation. Why are you having a confrontation with my apostles? He goes right to them, steps right in the conversation, doing what he's been doing all along, protecting the apostles. He says basically, what's the argument about? Which is interesting because Jesus already knows. But you'd think the scribes would chime in and just unload, let me tell you about your apostles, Jesus. And yet they're silent. They don't say a word. They keep their mouths shut. You see, they would much rather argue and debate with the apostles. They don't want to argue and debate with Jesus because it doesn't fare well for them when they do. And yet even more odd, the apostles are also quiet. We'll see why here in just a moment. But they're losing the argument with the scribe. They've lost the battle with the demon. No one speaks up until we meet our Father. Lowercase f, by the way, I should have specified that. We meet this father in the crowd. I thought it was quite fitting being Father's Day today. You're going to see the love of a father now for his son. This father has a pretty serious problem, verse 17. Then one from the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. Matthew adds that he wasn't just shouting. It kind of sounds like he's from a distance. And he goes, hey, I brought my son. Matthew says he wasn't just shouting. He fell on his knees before Jesus, begging, pleading to Jesus. And he calls him both Lord and Teacher, which tells you this man has faith. Albeit we're going to find out not perfect faith. But he's crying out because he has this burden on his heart. You think, well, what's weighing on the man's heart so much? His son was demon-possessed. Now, we know that's not uncommon for Jesus to deal with. He's done so many times. We've read about him several times, but this one's going to be different. This demon made the boy mute, unable to speak. But, my goodness, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Look at verse 18. And whenever it seizes him, the demon seizes the boy, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and he becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out. But here it is. But they could not. Well, this sounds awful. But at least we know why the apostles are not answering Jesus as to what's happening. Why is this confrontation going on? They're embarrassed. The man came looking for Jesus. Jesus was not there. Good news, though, the apostles are there. And not just one, 9 of them are there. Surely they can do something to help. And when they couldn't, what do you think the scribes were saying? This demon is torturing the boy. It's evident, it's obvious. We read some demons where they try to blend in with society. In fact, the first demon Mark records Jesus kicking out was a man worshiping in the synagogue. When Jesus interacted with them, it became very apparent. But this demon is quite different. It's causing epilepsy, causes the boy to be thrown to the ground. He's foaming at the mouth. He's seizing up stiff like a board. He couldn't speak. Later on, we're told he's deaf because of this. And it's not a physical issue. It's the demon causing this. Luke adds the boy would just scream from the demon, which is why some translations record him as being a lunatic. But, I mean, just think about the toil all this is taking on this little boy. Is there any wonder why the man brought the boy to Jesus? It's his only hope. The apostles couldn't do it. And Luke adds that the father begged them to heal his son. And that's the phrase was he's begged them. It's present. He's continually begging them to heal his sons. Please, please. And they couldn't do it. Now here's why this is so odd to me, at least on the surface. Because in Mark chapter 6, Jesus gave the apostles power over unclean spirits. They've cast out demons before because they had the power of Christ himself. Christ delegated his power to them. Mark 6 verse 13 says they cast out many demons. So what happened? It's Jesus' response that's so telling. We wouldn't have to have another verse outside of knowing his response to them in verse 19. O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Now, what's the problem? They're a faithless generation. But, well, hang on. Is it the crowd that's faithless? Or is it the apostles that are faithless? I mean, we expect that from the crowds and the scribes and the Pharisees. But it shouldn't be the case with the apostles. And just imagine for a moment you're Jesus, okay? How infuriating does it have to be, at least the way I perceive things? I mean, you're God in the flesh, you've picked these men, you've trained these men for 2.5 years, and they still have a lack of faith in his power. And you say, well, hang on, they believed before because they were able to do it. So why can't they do it here? They trusted before, why can't they now? Here's the difference. Jesus was not with them. Jesus is up on the mountain. They're by themselves. And as soon as they're left alone, two things happen. One, they start to trust in themselves more. Not their faith in Christ, themselves, and that caused their faith to falter. And we'll see that here in a moment. But first things first, Jesus deals with the boy. Verse 20. Then they brought him to him. They brought the boy to Jesus. And when he saw him, so this is, I hate to keep breaking them a verse, but I want you to understand that he's in hymns. So they brought the boy to Jesus, and when the boy saw Jesus, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So they're bringing the boy to Jesus, and the demon just kicks it into overdrive. You say, why? Jesus saw the boy, okay? The boy saw Jesus, okay? But the demon inside the boy saw Jesus. And that's when it goes berserk, convulsing him once again. You won't convince me that he's not trying to kill the boy in this moment. But in the midst of all of this happening, you've seen this in movies where there's like bombs dropping in the back, just stuff's blowing up, and all of a sudden the movie focuses in on like two people having a conversation. And in the background, stuff's just going nuts. But it focuses in. That's what happens here. The boy's convulsing, the crowd's over here going nuts, and everything narrows down to Jesus and his Father. And so he asked a question to the Father. This Father. How long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. This verse is so easy to glance over, and you miss a very important aspect of this. Why would Jesus ask the question? Again, keep in mind, you're the boy's father now. Put yourself in his shoes. Your son is on the ground in a full epileptic seizure right now because of this demon. You're begging Jesus to heal him. Jesus turns to you like it's just a common statement. How long has this been going on? It's like, hey, what are we going to do? Now, Jesus is God in the flesh. Jesus already knows the answer to the question. So why ask the question in the first place? You ask the question when the question is not for you. The question was for the boy's father. The boy's father is going to be made to think, okay, how long has this been happening? It's been happening from his childhood, his whole life. And you're going to understand that clearly so that when this stops here in just a moment, you won't question why it stopped. You won't question how it stopped. You'll know it was by my power that this happened. So he's making him think about this before he gets healed. From childhood, which is awful. I mean, it's been this way, this boy's his whole life, and what a miserable life it had to be. With the boy, the demon constantly trying to kill the boy. In verse 22, he says, and often he has thrown it. So now he is the demon. Often this demon has thrown the boy into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. So, we've talked about the toil this is taking on the boy. Now flip it to the toil it's taking on the father. Imagine being the father. You're constantly having to rescue your son from these problems. Well, keep him away from fire. You can't. They're everywhere. They use fire for everything. Keep him away from water. You can't. It's everywhere. And so you can hear the plea, and I appreciate the plea because if we knew nothing else, we would know this father loves his son. If you can do anything, have compassion. Now hang on a second. What happened? How do we end up with, I came to you because I knew you could do this. We were trying to find you. They couldn't help. We were looking for you. How do you go from that to this weak statement of faith, if you can do anything? It's if you can do it. Not will you do this. If you can. Now, what does that tell you about the Father's faith? We don't have to wonder what Jesus thought about this. In fact, let me just go ahead and bring his verse up, his statement up, and then we'll look at this for a second. Immediately, Jesus replies right back to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him. Now, do you think that statement is coincidental? See, the man just told Jesus, hey, if you can do anything, Jesus flips around and he uses the same phrase, if you can believe. He didn't have to say it that way. In fact, he says it several other ways different than that in previous statements. He throws that statement of the Father right back at the Father. If you can, the very fact that you brought your son to me tells me you at least believe that I can. So why are you asking the question in doubt? That's when Jesus gives this man a lesson. And listen, this is true for all of us today. All things are possible to him who believes. Jesus, if you can do this. No, that's not it. If you can believe, then all things are possible. You see, this is a direct challenge of faith here. Faith is something Jesus has talked about many times up to this point, but this is the first time where he's made it a mandate. It's not an issue of power for the miracle. They had the power. The apostles should have been able to do it. And they've proven they can do it many times. It's an issue of faith to access the power. That's the problem. Not the faith on the part of the recipient. Let's clear that up. There was no requirement of faith for a miracle. The lesson is on the part of the believers in him who are called to live by faith. Now, how would you respond to that if that's what, again, they're having a conversation. And the boy's over here just seizing like crazy. How would you respond? Would you get mad? Would you cry? Be upset? Frustrated? Instead, the man offers one of the most profound statements recorded in the Bible by a human that's not God in flesh. One of the most profound statements. And you get the same word immediately. Jesus replies as soon as the man finishes speaking. Jesus talks, and then as soon as Jesus finishes, the man speaks. Just boom, boom, boom. And immediately the father of the child calmly said, cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. one of the most profound statements. There's so much emotion here in all of this. Again, kids rolling on the ground, convulsing, and through tears. That means this man is bawling at this point in time. He says, I believe. It's not a question that I don't believe, but Lord, help my unbelief. And what he's saying is, it's not that I don't believe, it's just that I'm struggling in my belief. I'm struggling to have a strong faith. There's periods of doubt. There's periods of question. Hey, welcome to life. We all are there at different times. He has a faith in Jesus Christ, but he's been through so much, he's filled with doubt. Doubt and fear are never far away from faith. And the doubting father appeals to the only person that can help his faith. He appeals to the Lord, Lord, help my unbelief, in direct response to all things are possible to those who believe. Meaning all things, and we need to clarify that statement too, and I should have already done that. Meaning all things within God's will are possible to those who believe. You can't just say, and we'll get to this next week, that you have the faith of a mustard seed. You tell the mountain to move and be cast into the sea. That wasn't a literal statement. All right, I'm going to tell that house right there to move to this side because I want that piece. That's not what it was. It's saying with just a little bit of faith, you can do great big things. Now, how much faith is required for this to happen? Now, here's a question for you, and I don't have much left on this, but I want you to think about this question. Do you think that the Lord expects your faith to be perfect 100% of the time? Is that the requirement? If that's the requirement, every one of us might as well get up and go home. Because we have struggled. We struggle with doubt. We struggle with sin. We struggle with different things. When the reality is, we should be making the same statement. Lord, I believe. I'm here today because I believe. I study because I believe. I do these things because I believe. But Lord, there's times where I struggle in unbelief, and I need you to help my unbelief. It don't matter if you're an elder in the church, if you're a Christian of 2 weeks, if you've never become a Christian. That's going to be there. Verse 25, when Jesus saw that the people came running together towards him, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to a deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more. Now, this is interesting too, because if you're trying to put on a show, why don't you wait till the crowd's there? He doesn't do that. He sees the crowd, he immediately tells the demon, come out. There's not going to be a public spectacle. That's not his interest anymore. So as soon as he sees it, he tells it to come out. Then we see what actually happens, verse 26. Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him, and he became as one dead. So that many said, he's dead. Now, we know that when Jesus commanded a spirit to come out, they had no choice. There's no argument. There's no debating with Jesus. Not what they wanted, but they didn't have a choice. And immediately it comes out in a violent way. This is the demon's final protest. It won't matter. The whole life of this boy has been ravaged by this demon until Jesus speaks. And when it came out, the boy was left on the ground, looking like a corpse, and Mark says they thought he was dead. Maybe he was almost dead. I don't know how many more convulsions he could have had left in him. But just as compassionate as Jesus was to heal the boy in the face of doubt, we see the compassion once again. Jesus could have cast the demon out and told the father, all right, go get your kid. It's done. Go pick him up. Here's the face of compassion. Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. Jesus picked up the boy. Just a beautiful picture. Luke adds that it wasn't just that he picked him up. I want you to see the beauty of God's grace here. It's not just that he picked up the boy. Luke says he picked him up and he gave the boy back to his father. Now, the miracle in and of itself is an amazing lesson, but that's the incident. Next week, Lord willing, we're going to get into the instruction. Where do they go from this? Why does all of this happen? Because the apostles are going to come to him and say, hey, why couldn't we do this? You did it. Why can't we do it? And Jesus is about to teach them a faith lesson. And understand where we're going. He goes faith lesson. He goes into things like marriage. He goes rapid fire lessons. And when he finishes those, he comes back to faith again. He bookends this teaching with an importance of faith on both sides of it. But as we close this part, we're not going to try to get into the instruction this week. We'll do that, Lord willing, next week. I just want you to think about that statement. Think about how profound a statement that is. Lord, I believe. You're here. I have to believe you're here because you believe. It's hot. We could be taking a nap. And yet, we're here because we believe. But that doesn't mean that moments of doubt aren't also just around the corner. We're not going to struggle with that. It doesn't mean my faith is perfect. And you'll see something in the next lesson, Lord willing, that shows Jesus already understands that. Do you have struggles in your faith? And I'm asking this group that question specifically. Because I'm talking now to a more Christian audience now. And sometimes it's not that you struggle in your faith. It's you feel like a failure when you do struggle in your faith. And that's the problem a lot of us have as Christians. When we struggle, well, I feel like the biggest failure in the world. There's a reason this is called a faith journey. A faith race. It's not a short thing. It's not an easy trip. Not a Sunday stroll. It's a journey. The Lord knows our struggles. The Lord knows that we're weak. He gave us His Word to be encouraged in His strength and in His power, in the avenue of prayer to cry out to Him in those moments of doubt and struggle and weakness. And when I think about that Father's statement, as He's heartbroken, looking at His Son, I get a new appreciation for grace and mercy because this Father received just that. Even with a struggling faith. Not because the man was merciful, but because God is. And I want you to think about what a blessing that is for all of us today. That you have that same grace and mercy extended to you in the offer of salvation, if you're not a Christian, in the offer of the continual cleansing in the blood of Christ for your sin as a Christian. That all these things that God did for us, knowing the struggles that we're going to have and the difficulties that we're going to come across. He still gave us every bit of this. So I want to leave you with this as we wrap up here. God doesn't expect you to be perfect. He expects you to be faithful. He perfects us through our faith in Him. Now, when He says be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, He's not setting a bar you can't attain to. It's a completeness of faith in Him. And He's the one who perfects us by cleansing us. So if you've never obeyed the gospel, I want to extend the invitation to you this afternoon. We're going to have another invitation song here in just a moment. That offer is always there. You don't need me behind the pulpit to say we're going to have an invitation song, to think that now all of a sudden you can answer the gospel call. It's there. It's always there. The gospel's never not calling. But if you're here as a Christian and again, I said it this morning, you're struggling in your faith, stop feeling like a failure. And understand it's a process that you work through. You study to show yourself approved. You're continually learning and continually growing, all the while God's continually perfecting. So if you need prayers, you need encouragement, you need to talk, you want to study, whatever that need is, whatever the need is, again, answering the call, whatever it might be. I want you to think about that question. I want you to search your heart. If you have that need, I want you to come as we stand and we sing this invitation song.
When we walk with the Lord in the light of His Word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the sky, but its smile quickly drives it away. Not a doubt nor a fear, not a sigh nor a tear, can abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a